Hey everyone, welcome to another top 10 list. This week's top 10 list is going to be a little different than what I usually do. We're coming up on the anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic. That was April 15th, 1912. And, well, there's lots of movies and lots of info out on the Titanic itself, but what kind of currency were those people holding on the ship? So that's what inspired this week's top 10 list. This week I'm doing the top 10 types of US currency that would have been found on the Titanic. And with that, we will start with number 10. Number 10, this is a $1 legal tender. Now this particular one's from 1917, but the only difference between this one and the version that would have been on the Titanic would have been the series date itself. That would have been the series of 1880, which would have had a little bit more of an ornate red background on the one right over here. But other than that, the 1880 $1 legal tender is the $1 bill most likely found on passengers on the Titanic in 1912. So that's number 10 on my list, the $1 1880 legal tender. Number 9. Number 9, also from the legal tender series. This one would have been the 1880 $2 legal tender note. Now, this particular one's a replica of the rainbow note, so with the exception of the rainbow pattern on the back, this is what that note would have looked like. The $2 legal tender, take a quick peek at the back like that. The $2 legal tender, this would have also been 1880. This particular one is the reprint of the 1869. But yeah, the 1880 $2 legal tender, that would have been the one most likely in people's pockets as far as $2 legal tenders go. And that brings us to number 9 on the list. Number 8. Also from the legal tender series, we are talking about the wood chopper, the $5 wood chopper. Now, this particular one had a version from 1907. This particular is a reproduction of the 1869. So once again, if you were to just ignore the rainbow pattern in the back, that would be what that would have looked like. The 1907 wood chopper note, very famous note, of course, with the wood chopper. He's called the wood chopper because he's holding his axe. He's got his dog, his wife, his baby, the cabin in the back. Take a look at the back of this particular one as well. So the 1907 wood chopper definitely would have been around in 1912 and most likely would have been on the Titanic when it went down. So that would be number 8 on my list, the $5 1907 wood chopper. Number 7. Number 7 on the list would be from 1901. This is the $10 legal tender. This is the bison note. The $10 bison note from 1901 is the highest denomination legal tender that would have made it on the Titanic, I'm sure. This particular one from 1901, the $10 legal tender, of course, you've got Lewis and Clark on there. You've got the bison dead center. Taking a quick peek at the back. Lots of open spaces on these. These are just really cool notes when you see the real thing in person. But yeah, if you were looking for a $10 bill on the Titanic, odds are this is what you would have come across. So a $10 1901 legal tender is number 7 on my list. Number 6. Well, not only were there legal tenders, there were also silver certificates. So if you happen to be carrying silver certificates on the Titanic, the $1 silver certificate you are most likely to have had would be a Black Eagle. The 1899 $1 Black Eagle would have definitely made its way onto the Titanic. This one is from 1899, and this was the same note up until 1917, I believe it was. So yeah, the 1899 $1 Black Eagle. This is the $1 silver certificate that would have been most likely in somebody's pocket at the time. That is number 6, 10987. Yep, number 6 on the list, the Black Eagle from 1899. Number 5, also talking about silver certificates. This one is the $2 silver certificate. This one is the mini porthole. Now, the mini porthole note, as well as the previous note and the next note, were all part of the 1899 series. The mini porthole from 1899, this particular note replaced the educational series, the $1, $2, and $5 educational series of 1896. So with these being pumped out in production, the $2 1899 would have been the silver certificate you would have most likely seen if you had a $2 silver certificate on the Titanic. That's the back of it there. So yeah, the $2 mini porthole makes it the most likely note that many people would carry. Oddly enough, the $2 bill basically comes into play because of horse racing. When horse racing first started out, they always wanted to keep it as a higher up, high class event. So that's why you see the minimum bet at a horse track as $2. With the minimum bet being $2, it definitely gave a use to a $2 bill such as this. And it also, how did they put it? It kept out the riffraff. Nowadays, the lowest bet at a horse track isn't $2. They have 10-cent superfectas. So much for keeping out the riffraff. $2 isn't low enough. You can make a bet for 10 cents. Anyway, the 1899 mini porthole, that is number 5. Number 4. The next silver certificate you would have found would have been the 1899 Chief, the $5 silver certificate, 1899 Chief note. What more do I have to say about this? This note has made many of my lists. Just such a fascinating note, such an impressive note. Take a quick peek at the back here. Once again, you've got the wide open spots just to make it tougher for counterfeiters because the red and blue fibers do shine through on there. The $5 Chief note from 1899, once again, one of the replacement notes for the educational series, definitely would have made someone's pocket on a Titanic trip, that is for sure. So the 1899 Chief, number 4 overall on my list of notes you would have found on the Titanic. Number 3, there was a $10 silver certificate in play at the time. They didn't make one in 1896, so there was no educational, so there was no need to replace it in 1899. So we have to go all the way back to, well, would have been 1880 for the design, but they actually reprinted this particular silver certificate in 1907. So the 1907 $10 silver certificate would have been the most likely $10 silver certificate you would have found on the Titanic. This is known as the Tombstone note. It's known as the Tombstone because of the design around Vice President Hendricks, who actually died in office in 1885. That is the Tombstone note. Take a look at the back there. This particular note, like I said, when it comes to $10 silver certificates, there aren't many different styles of silver certificate, and this particular one had been around for quite some time. They just simply changed the design of the seal. By 1907, this was a much smaller blue seal on there, as you see with most silver certificates. Even this example's got the blue serial numbers here, but this is the 1880 version. But like I said, the one that would be on the Titanic could have been the 1907 version of this particular note, and that would be number 3 on my list. Number 2, not only was there legal tenders, not only were there silver certificates, there were also gold certificates. Now, this is a $10 gold certificate. This particular one is a replica from 1922. However, there was a 1907 variant of this note, and the 1907 variant is definitely old enough to have taken a voyage on the Titanic as well. 1907 $10 gold certificate, very interesting note. They wanted to make sure you knew it was a gold certificate, so instead of doing the standard green on the back, they call it gold, but it's actually an orange hue on the back, just to make sure that this would stand out. So like I said, this particular one is 1902, very, very similar to the this one is 1922, very similar to the 1907 version that would have been on the Titanic. It's just cool to see $10 in gold coin on this particular note like that. So that would be number 2 on my list of potential Titanic notes. And what is number 1 on my list? Well, if there was a 10, there was probably a 20. This is my $20. This one is a 1922 replica as well. However, the particular note here had a 1906 version that looked very, very similar, if not identical. And there was the 1905 Technicolor note as well. Now, either of those could have been on the Titanic. Both of them have a look just like this. The Technicolor would have bright yellow where it says 20, bright yellow where it says in gold coin, and more of a yellow background than just the regular paper color as far as that particular note goes. Once again, on the back of the note, they did share the orange printing, or gold printing, however you would rather call it, as the $10 note. There was also a 50 as well and a 100, but those aren't as common as the 10 and the 20 were. So yeah, the 20, that is my number one note that is most likely found on the Titanic. All right, guys, that's what I've got for you this week. My top 10 notes potentially on the Titanic. Well, I'm sure at least one of each of these were on the Titanic at one point. That was my list for you this week. I decided to take it in a slightly different direction than normal, with this being coming up on the anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic. I figured with all the other information out there, this is something you don't get to see too often. All right, guys, if you have an idea for a list, go ahead and leave that down in the comments. If I can make that, I will try to put that together for you, and I will put your name in the video as well. If you learned anything new, go ahead and hit that like button. If you like what you see and you want to see more, please subscribe. Guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next week.